You care about sustainability, and you've already done a lot. Renewables are increasing, efficiency is improving, emissions are declining. By many measures, you're leading. But the real question is, compared to whom? Introducing your industry benchmark. Objective data and clear context. Because when performance is measured against the industry, you're currently 37% below the average. So, are you really sustainable? Not quite, not yet. Now you can measure yourself against your industry, against best-in-class performers, and against your true potential. See what's missing, learn what works, act with clarity. This is how sustainability moves forward. Benchmark, learn, act. You care about sustainability, and you've already done a lot. Renewables are increasing, efficiency is improving, emissions are declining. By many measures, you're leading. But the real question is, compared to whom? Introducing your industry benchmark. Objective data and clear context. Because when performance is measured against the industry, you're currently 37% below the average. So, are you really sustainable? Not quite, not yet. Now you can measure yourself against your industry, against best-in-class performers, and against your true potential. See what's missing, learn what works, act with clarity. This is how sustainability moves forward. Benchmark, learn, act. You care about sustainability, and you've already done a lot. Renewables are increasing, efficiency is improving, emissions are declining. By many measures, you're leading. But the real question is, compared to whom? Introducing your industry benchmark. Objective data and clear context. Because when performance is measured against the industry, you're currently 37% below the average. So, are you really sustainable? Not quite, not yet. Now you can measure yourself against your industry, against best-in-class performers, and against your true potential. See what's missing, learn what works, act with clarity. This is how sustainability moves forward. Benchmark, learn, act.
Okay, I think we're live. Nice. Hi and welcome all. I am really excited to talk about this topic today. We're going to be talking about energy efficiency in the Gulf area, especially for multi-site retailers. I am Sarah from marketing team at Apollo, and I am joined by Sedar today. Sedar, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, hello everybody. Thank you, Sarah. I am Sedar Suna from Apollo. I am part of the founding team here and currently head of customer success. And I'm originally an electrics and electronical engineer, and I have experience in steel, retail, digital transformation software, and currently my main focus is environmental sustainability. So thanks for all. And yeah, I can gladly answer all your questions in the Q&A session.
Yeah. So to do a little bit of housekeeping, this session is going to take about like 45 minutes, and then we could go up to like an hour or so with the Q&A. We will also be doing like a little live demonstration at the end of the session, where we're going to bring in like an internal tool that we've been using for the first time ever into this kind of event. So I suggest you stick around for that. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my first question. Actually, we're going it a little fast, but yeah.
Okay.
So starting off, I just want to first acknowledge that we wouldn't be holding this session if everyone in this room, including us, didn't want to cut costs. So my first thing is going to come from like money region. So for a retailer, running stores across the Gulf, where does energy actually sit in like a cost sheet, you would think?
In the operational perspective, the energy cost sits just behind the rent and the payrolls. So it's one of the biggest one, and it is the only one that you can do something about in this quarter. And if you are dedicated enough, even in this month. So yeah, big investments take so much time. Of course, they need approvals and budget and all the stuff, but some operational changes, some basic improvements can still improve it a lot. So yeah, the energy is the main one here. And this is why in nowadays world, it's one of the main topics to cut energy costs. So in the Gulf region, for example, in Dubai, for every store that has surpassed 6,000 kilowatts per hour in monthly measurements, is already at the top tier rates for electricity. So yeah, it's very easy for a store to surpass 6,000 kilowatt hours. It's basically all of them. So in Gulf region, similar to the Dubai, also Saudi has the same kind of application. Qatar has a similar approach to this. So everyone is paying the top dollar for their electricity, and more importantly, they are paying for their weights at the top rate also. So in today's world, with energy price getting higher and higher, all of your weights and actual consumptions are being more and more important every day. And the thing that I like very much is the current measurements tell us that 20% in their energy cost cuts is actually equal to 5% of increase in your sales. So as a retailer, maybe most of our guests here will understand why nowadays finance is asking more about those energy costs, not the facility managers.
Yeah. So as far as I know, I wanted to ask this. When people compare stores, the number everyone uses is like kilowatt hour per square meter. So that is literally just like consumption divided by floor area, right?
Exactly right. The retail sector uses it a lot, but it may lead you somewhere very wrong. It may lead you somewhere very right. It depends on your calculation method that we will step on during this session. But it also changes sector by sector. So yes, for retail, that's the main KPI, we can say it.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into like in it all, like I just want to touch upon like the regulations that are in place in the Gulf right now that people need to be aware of. Maybe they haven't like planned for. So, my next question is that like, do you have anything to share with us on that stage?
Sorry, I missed the last part of your sentence.
Basically, I'm asking like, is there any regulations in place that we need to know in the Gulf?
Yeah, other than increasing prices, the one main jump in the Gulf area has been the last year's new regulation that's in the UAE Federal Climate Law. So by the end of the May 2025, they enforced all their basically corporate companies to report their GHG emissions. So it means that for all your spends, all your energy uses, mostly your electricity for Scope 2, should be reported, should be measured, and should be audited by a third-party independent officiator. So this regulation by itself has made a lot of noise in the sector. So everyone is trying to collect some data for their reports. And the first due date was 13th of May this year. They gave just a year for preparation. And if our guests here hasn't been reporting those data to their supply chain or the auditors themselves, those things usually take phases to fully roll in. So we are expecting it to be a comprehensive application for all of the retail sector nowadays, in maybe 1 or 2 years. So this is the key regulation that speed up those processes. And for reporting purposes, you need your Scope 2 coming directly from electricity mostly. And to have those numbers to those electricity consumptions, you need to collect the data, clear the data, and make them reportable. Before that, it was just a measurement and some, good application, good practice, but now it's a legal capability. But some of our maybe guests here will think, but the levels, the thresholds for carbon emissions to be on the reporting side enforced by law is too high that a retail chain retail cannot go that deep into the emissions. That's right for the mathematical purposes, but law is not what I'm mostly concerned about. But because if the law does not tell you to measure those things, your supply chain will, your customers, your landlords, your associates, partners, your global network, they will force you to run those numbers, report them frequently. So when we talk about with some Gulf area retail customers, they say they don't have the data because they have never needed before. But now they are trying to make it a project with a deadline to calculate them. And if you have those data on hand clearly, it's just a work of an afternoon, right? You just collect the data, clear it, and report. But now, just because missing all that data itself, it has just become a project for everyone.
Yeah. And we could say that like if someone here wasn't already like investing in this kind of like energy efficiency project, getting into it right now would also mean that they're gonna be able to report easier, right?
Yeah, exactly. The good thing about those regulations are they are forcing you to do your job in an efficient and meaningful way. It's not. It is not just a reporting. It's actually a method. And in Apollo, we also have a method that's very similar to those approaches, and we call it benchmark learn act. So we will talk a lot about in this
Yeah,
session.
I'm gonna ask you to get to that as well.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, my question is, and I think like everybody here kind of wants to know because we wanted to talk more about the cooling side of things, like its effect on energy. So my question is, how much of a store's energy is cooling in the Gulf specifically? Like I know you put some numbers
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah, the scientific measurements tell us that the Gulf region has a 70% on average for energy costs as a cooling. That's because the hot weather's in the area, obviously. But internationally speaking, it's currently on average of 20% of total energy cost. But we are expecting with the climate changes and increasing needs, we are expecting it to be doubled by 2050. So the Gulf region has a lead here because it is a much warmer climate than the average. But the same application is official for everyone. The energy costs are increasing because of the cooling costs. So after clearing that, there are two ways to calculate your cooling costs in Gulf region, especially if you're in a mall. And those two different methods, the difference between them actually can make you lose money. The first approach is you are on a street level store and you have your own energy bill, and you know entire bill is consists of the cooling, the lighting, the displays, the tills, everything is inside it. But if you are in a mall, most of the buildings and the malls in the Gulf region has some distinct cooling system, which means you do not have your own AC systems in your store. You just have fans to blow out cold air. But the cold air itself coming from the mall itself, the mall has a chiller plant, and it's centralized cooling just deployed throughout the mall. So in best case, your landlord is sending you two different bills. One is your electricity bill inside the store that has excluded the cold air, which is the highest one. And the second bill is that cold air bill. And if you are lucky, I said, because most of the malls send those bills within the rent, service fee, or monthly service charges. So most of the time, you are very blind on the cooling energy. And as a finance level perspective, you just look at your electricity bill, which has excluded the cooling, but you don't know about it. You think your cooling cost is only 10% of your energy, and you think you are very efficient and you are very low cost on the energy side for cooling. But it's not the real thing, and it's a trap because it also makes you not realize the opportunities and fields of improvement here.
So I would say it is then like safe to assume that the kind of like bill that you're getting, like the honest number, the actual number is more than what your actual bill suggests, right?
Yes, at least 40% higher if you are just only looking your store's electricity bill. And this is why we call this session's name as cooling dilemma, because the dilemma here is you are getting charged for both uses, but you're not realizing that's an energy cost most of the time. That's reported separately.
Yeah. I also remember that you mentioned like one of our taglines, like a little slogan even that I wanted to share here is like, you cannot manage what you don't measure, and then you cannot improve what you don't manage, which I think is really important in that kind of like it really like reminds me of what really matters.
Thanks for adding that. Right.
Yeah. So I think the problem is kind of like as we say, like the cooling dilemma is kind of like apparent now. We know kind of the big problem that we have. I think we can kind of like get into how it all works. And so I'm just going to ask you to walk me through a time Apollo was like working, let's say like hypothetically, or like you can refer to a time we actually did that Apollo was working with a retail estate, and like what the actual method was, what we went through when like, adjusting their plan for this energy efficiency situation.
Yes, as Apollo, we employ this method for all of our customers, regardless from the sector itself. But again, applies for retail sector, obviously. It's benchmark, learn, act. It's our motto, it's our methodology, and we gone a little comfortable with just giving it a name that it actually is. So yeah, it was very easy for us, but it's easy to remember. So it's 3 steps, and each step is equally important. And if you just miss one of them, your analysis and your investment, and at the end of the day, your results can be less than your expectations or targets. So let's start with benchmark. Benchmarking means ranking your sites, right? But it's not that simple, because before ranking your sites, you need first measurements. And those measurements can be misleading because your stores will act differently because of the environmental effects, not because of their performance. So if you are trying to report your performance, you need to measure only the effects of your actions and applications, right? So the benchmark is therefore starts with segmentation. You cannot compare a supermarket with a pharmacy for an energy consumption perspective, or you cannot just compare 2 different fashion stores within different locations or different sizes or even different segmentation. For example, a premium segment mega store should have an increased energy intensity than a discount fashion store, right? It's an obvious difference, but if you don't make such segmentations and grouping, your analysis will fall short on opportunities and the missing and problems. The second part is a normalization. Even if you perfectly group and perfectly match all the segments in your portfolio, you are still missing one crucial step. It's the normalization part. And for Gulf region, since the weather effect is highly effective on the energy cost as a cooling constant, you need to normalize your consumptions for weather and temperature, right? Because if you just simply combine 2 different stores that are exactly the same profile, same segmentation, same size, but in different climate zones. So one is obviously in a hotter region, and that one should obviously consume more, but it does not imply that that store is more inefficient. So to avoid such risks and such miscalculations, you need to normalize according to weather. And finally, the ranking itself. After the normalized energy efficiency, you just rank your stores and you see the best performing 10%, worst performing 10%, and now you are ready to learn about it. So the output of benchmark stage should be a short list of stores that needs attention regardless of their consumption and like floor area, for example. In the learning phase, it's now a decision to what to do on which sites. So it's about data analysis or expert opinions or on-site measurements. And then comes the acting phase, which you take some actions and you do something and expect some results. And those actions can be with investment, can behavioral changes, and we can discuss it maybe later. But I should have a warning sign here. Most of the time that I see an energy efficiency project that is moving on the field, it's probably missing first 2 steps and usually starts with the acting phase. Some department has some budgets and they have a goal of spending that budget on energy efficiency equipment, and they just do it. And they usually do it on the store that has the highest consumption or highest energy intensity. While it can be true, it's a guess because you don't know how efficient that store is at the beginning because you don't have benchmark or a learn stage. You just acted. And at the end of the day, yes, you spent some money, you used your budget, you purchased some better equipment, and your energy efficiency obviously should increase, but not at full potential. You may be looking at the wrong half of your entire portfolio. So we shouldn't insist on just acting, but the entire methodology is a must-have altogether.
Yeah, I remember when I first came to Apollo, there was a little anecdote you told me that it looks really good on the company side when they are acting, but it is definitely not sustainable. And it's a little ironic when we're going for sustainability and cutting costs and everything. My next question is going to be because we talked so much about the benchmark specifically. And before the session, I also asked you, you told me that in the Gulf area, benchmarking can be a little tough. It can be a little harder because of certain variables. So my question is, so that everybody hears here, what actually makes benchmarking harder in the Gulf region?
Yeah, great one. We must talk this a lot. But before we start, the reason for most companies start with acting is actually the answer of your question, because benchmarking and learning is the hardest part. The acting part is also, if you are getting some, consultancy, it can seem very easy. You have the budget, you have the control, you buy the equipment, and you move on. But without making benchmark, as I said before, it's very inefficient progress. So why is benchmarking such a hard topic? I can call three reasons for that. First is the boundary problem that I mentioned before. The mall energy bills are coming in different shapes and forms and periods of time and formats. So you don't know your total energy consumption. The mall management send you a bill that is also including a cooling, but it is shown as rent or service fee. So the one hard thing about this is this, and the second one is the fragmentation. So the Gulf area is a very large area divided by different regions. So each of them has different utility providers, different tariffs, different billing periods, and different equipment. So combining them all together is actually a transition work, and that transition work is usually done by people working in the company, and those data usually sits on their spreadsheet. So we have seen this a lot. Someone just quits the job, and their spreadsheets are handed over to someone else, and that new employee has no idea about what to do, what's the transition, and just conducts the data transition without knowing what it is. So the data get lost and the analysis gets meaningless. So the one problem is this fragmentation and recombining. And the third problem that I see is the availability. Dubai has some research in the frequent years that they conducted more than 500 large buildings, including business centers and shopping malls. There were more than 500, I think 550 buildings, and they asked for their energy measurement data, their energy consumptions, but branched out, like not just the building itself, but separate stores inside it. So what they see is more than half of the buildings has no reportable data. It doesn't come in hand. Of course, they measured it. Maybe they eye checked it from the energy analyzers, noted down in some spreadsheets, but the data is not available at the moment. So the study has a shocking result that you don't know how much you are consuming. Yes, you know building-wise, but in separate regions, you cannot report it directly. So that availability problem also stops all the work, all the analysis, all the benchmarking, all the learning steps, and you just sit with acting alone. That's why you choose act, actually, most of the time.
Yeah. And like that specific study I have also like checked out, and it is really interesting to me, but I want to hear it from you as well. Like, do you think that comparison really helped them? Like, because that was the same study that benchmarked their energy use. And I believe that might be like a little answer to one of the questions we have in the chat as well.
Oh, okay, that's great then. So we are being efficient here.
Yeah.
More than half of those buildings couldn't report their data, but some of them have. And when we inspect those data, we actually seen that automatically normalized for weather because they are all in the same place, in the similar regions, similar weather conditions. There is still a 30% gap between best performer and worst performer. So even if you just throw out the weather effect, which is the highest one, and we trying to fix it all the time, without weather effect, we still have 30% way of going in our energy costs. So it's possible. There are some best cases, best practices, regardless of weather conditioning and climate. There are still some opportunities. So that study is very valuable for that too. And it shows that we should all act on that data.
Absolutely. And I'm going to get a little bit more into normalization here that you already mentioned, but I think it really matters for the Gulf region because of the weather, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that when I imagine it, I am automatically thinking like two different cities, maybe two different Emirates, and like obviously there are big chain brands in there, and you want to compare them to make sure that you're actually efficient, but it can get hard. I think you had an example you shared with me here. Could you go ahead and share with the class?
Yeah, okay. The normalization is a very odd question, but a very fun one. It makes you answer this question. What if your two stores that are exactly the same physically, same customer footprint, same segmentation, same lighting, and they are in the same spot? They are just across the street. Which one would perform better? But since none of our stores are across the street and totally identical with each other, we have to normalize them. We cannot punish a store for being in a hotter climate or reward one in a more mild climate, let's say. So we must ensure that our data analysis and ranking is honest and transparent with weather conditions. So the point is, we should supply such a data at the end of this analysis that you can compare your stores, and it's not just a meeting level data. It's a reportable, analytical, and there is some algorithm behind it, and you can prove that which store is efficient or not. So in Apollo, we tried to perfect that algorithm, and we actually managed it looking at the regression results. We now can normalize the stores if they are in the same segment and the segmentation part is done properly, then you can normalize it. And one critical part here for normalization, you shouldn't normalize wrong data. For example, if you are using different HVAC system set points or even different set points for your fridges, let's say in a pharmacy, then it's an operational flow. If you normalize it against your behaviors, it will just cross out your behavioral impact on the negative efficiency. So you will be blind of your actions. Therefore, you should only normalize according to environmental effects that you cannot control and have an influence on. So yeah, that's the point that we need to care. After that, normalization is just an algorithm.
Yeah, and I pulled up the slide that you had for this specific question. If you wanted to like share anything else.
Looking at the slide, the left graph is the raw data. Obviously, the store A is the more energy intense one, and we need to send a crew there to fix something. Maybe we need to conduct an audit and make some investment and spend some money on. But when we normalize it, yes, store A is consuming more, but it's because of the weather conditions. It's not an inefficient store. Moreover, it's a more efficient store when you normalize it. Yes, the weather is hot, but the store is performing very well under that condition. While store B, seeming to be maybe a smaller or a different segmented store, yes, it's consuming less, but it's way more inefficient. And there are lots of low-hanging fruits there to collect to make it as efficient as store A. So normalization, as the simplest way, can be shown with this graph. Yeah.
So one more question here that I had regarding normalization. You had mentioned just now about weather adjustment, and when you say like weather adjustment, I'm automatically thinking like someone keeping track of that, and like an actual person, and that sounds operationally challenging. So what actually happens there?
Yeah, that's just math and algorithms, as I said, and that's not the hard part. Like Apollo is not trying to sell its greatest algorithm of normalization. No, anyone can do that in some way. But the hard part is keeping it a constant flow, constant process, without human errors, all the time, transparently and live, and doing it for all of your plants and stores at the same time. So normalization data is a decision-making data, and you cannot risk it to include some human errors or miscalculations. And the data integration point is also very important because the weather data is integrated. All of the environmental data is integrated and automatically flowing to Apollo systems. So yeah, a human can create a normalization math, but it cannot run the operation for a 400 chain retail store business. And the AI layer in Apollo actually comes in handy this way. We always know that your stores are analyzed with the right data, right environmental data, normalized with the right environmental data, and all of your actions has an impact on your normalized score.
Yeah, just lower product. So and one more
maybe like sorry to interrupt, but I should also include that most of the time, as I said before, your investments are made in the highest demanding stores, right? The biggest ones, the most premium ones, the highest land floor and highest consumption, probably the highest intensity. But as far as Apollo portfolio results, your highest performing stores are also your highest energy intense stores. Their energy intensity and consumption is coming from their customer demands, their operation flow, and their daily routines, not because their energy inefficiency. So yeah, keeping the focus on the right side is actually very important here.
It's also like, now that you mention it, it's really interesting to me that that highest consuming store can actually be the like highest efficiency one.
Yeah,
Like it's really
exactly.
interesting, and you never really know until you like benchmark and learn and then act. So I
Yeah.
am actually going to take us back to that, because I will ask you to like delve a little bit deeper into like learn and act, so that we really know what the framework is.
Yes, okay. We collected all of our data, we segmented it, grouped it, and benchmarked it and ranked it, and now we know our most inefficient 10% stores, right? Now we have to act on it. The energy efficiency has two main ways. Either you can buy a better equipment, or you can train your organization to behave better. So the first way is a more traditional way. You spend some money, you invest some, you buy some equipment, and you get the efficiency, and it stays there, most important one. And you make some investment, and now the system is working. That's okay. But on the other side, that's very expensive. That needs approval, usually slow, and usually a corporate approval or network demanding project that you usually cannot have the budget for. The other one is organizational behavior change. Is very easy, almost free. You can just motivate people and show them that you are monitoring their behaviors, and which store is behaving worse knows that they are behaving worse, and they just change their behavior. With just true training and true tracking models, it's very easy to achieve, and it's free, it's fast, it needs no approval, and it has a real impact on the energy efficiency. But the risk here is those programs usually fail in a very predictable way, right? You first start with an ambition, first month, 2 month, or even maybe a quarter. You just work very hard on those numbers. You try to compete with all the stores, and their behavior improves. Then some upper management stops looking at those data, keeping track, or giving rewards or recognition to those people, and the program falls off because of the turnovers, because of the motivation, whatever you name it. So the risk here is not attending to the behavioral part, and not recognizing the potential and benefits here. So it needs a good tracking to make it successful. Yeah.
Yeah. It's again really interesting that you mentioned like how behavior, changing that behavior is basically like free, but it can be challenging as well. My question is, what kind of like smaller maybe version of the efficiency plan would you describe? Like if you could describe a
Mhm.
version of
Yeah.
efficiency plan that is going to be like so actionable that the people here are going to be able to like implement it maybe more
Yeah.
this Monday.
Yes,
What would it?
hopefully so. Well, the behavioral part is actually very easy if you have the benchmark data and normalized data. After normalization and ranking them, nothing moves people more than a sweet competition, right? If a store manager knows it's competing badly against a rivalry in the same organization, maybe, but still a rival, let's say two of the top most winning or earning stores, that competition will force people to internally act and behave in a more energy efficient way. You have seen this hundreds of times. They just start adjusting their climate set points. They just start turning off their computers while they leave instead of leaving it standby. Those small steps actually make difference, but all they need is a recognition. On the equipment part, the acting is more of a procedure because it has a budget, it has an engineering behind it. So first you need to measure, and again you need to benchmark and normalize. Then you know which store is the least efficient, and you can, in the learning step, you can just say, okay, 3 a.m. in the morning, nothing is happening in that building. No money is gained for the company, but that store has an anomaly. That store has a huge rate of energy consumption here. That usually implies a behavioral problem because somebody left something turned on, right? They didn't turn off as they're supposed to be. So that implies that. But let's see all the day's consumption, and that store is constantly during the entire day, 24 hours are above the benchmark limits, is consumption is consuming a lot during the entire day. So it it implies an equipment problem. Then you need to surgically act on those problems for equipment side, because then you need some sub-metering. You need to surgically monitor every part of your store. If it's a big store, maybe even 4 or 5 sub-metering. And in Apollo, we call this a digital twin. So you surgically measure and monitor entire store, and you detect where the most problematic part is. Then you need a field audit. This audit means an engineering team comes into your site, they conduct some measurement searches, and they they detect your base load, your equipment levels, energy levels, and what projects you can make, what investments you can make to gain what ROI. So after this audition, you now have a report to just send to CFO, get the budget, get the approval, and move on, because now you know which store is the least efficient one, what needs to be done there, which equipment needs to be bought, and what's the budget and ROI. So yeah, that's the entire acting flow in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned to me that there are like two really cheap wins that can be achieved in the Gulf region. I didn't catch if you like touched upon that. I was reading the chat, to be honest. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
lie to you. Like
that's
talking
the
about
problem. We can go deeper. Yeah, the first one is the closed hours thing. If you just check your store's closed hours consumption, you can have lots of data and information about that store and that staff actually. And sometimes it may not be the staff itself. Sometimes some equipment are taking too much load in the nighttime. It can happen, but they need to be analyzed. And actually, Apollo benchmark makes you realize that misinformation or anomaly, let's say. And the second one we can say is the thermostat discipline. If you do not have an automation system that's connected throughout entire organization and controls all of your fridges, refrigerators, freezers, or HVAC units, you have some people on stores that set some numbers, right, to some target levels. And making it 1 degree colder actually means 5% more energy at your bill level. So those behavioral changes, even the set point and thermostat discipline, can gain you 5 to 10% if they are missing 2 centigrade Celsius. And yeah, those are the big behavioral changes that we can do. And as I mentioned, they come with some motivation, some monitoring, tracking, and recognition.
Yeah. And then regarding the act part again, I think like you can touch upon this as well. We've talked how like especially for retailers, especially for like imagine like cosmetic store or whatever. What can happen is like if you go to the employees and tell them that like okay, so we need to like increase this variable and then decrease this and that. At the end of the day, they are like salespeople or like
Well,
that kind of
yeah,
situation can happen. How do we like make it like worth their
yeah,
time actually?
that will happen actually because it's a corporate strategy. The energy efficiency is a program that entire organization should take ownership of. Because if you keep giving your store managers only sales targets, they will only focus on the sales. They will not care about energy efficiency at all. So it must be an organizational change. If you want to move people, you need policies, you need tight scheduling and monitoring. And as I mentioned before, I cannot stress this enough: recognition and rewarding. So ranking comes in hand at this point, and it's very effective as we have seen so far.
Nice. So we're actually like running a little late, but I have one last question that I think like people in this session might be wondering. So I think everything we've been talking about is very inspiring, and I believe this kind of conversation can be brought to like their leadership, or that kind of conversation could happen. But could you remind us like what kind of things are happening in the Gulf region right now that can make that kind of like
Yeah, there are 3 main signals here. Yeah, the first signal is the public strategies, because as Dubai and Saudi and UAE has deployed, they have now targets, as I mentioned before, the 2030 target of 30% of energy efficiency. And by 2050, it goes more than 50%. That's the target. And even Saudi went further, and they have now officiated a company, a public company, named Tarshid, and its only job is to renovate and retrofit energy efficiency applications and technologies in its building. And it has been on works for many years now, and its budget is getting bigger and bigger every day now that the climate concerns are increasing. So that's the signal one, the public strategies. Signal two is the law that I mentioned before, the GHG protocol emission reporting. And again, as I said, the law itself may not concern you at this stage because of your total emission level is not enough to go into the threshold and to be ready for auditions. But your supply chain will demand you to report those numbers and actually improve them. You have many customers that they have nowhere close carbon emission as the law implies, but they have to report those numbers to their customers because their customers have those thresholds. And
Yeah.
let's say they are big automotive factories, they are big holdings, big groups, big retail companies. So in total, they have the number, but it demands its supply chain to report them through numbers. And it can actually lose you money, lose your prestige, and lose your market share if you do not report them. And I'm pretty sure most of the people who are in this session right now had some kind of reporting for their supply chain already. That's very common. And the third signal is the ISO 50001 itself. It's the global international energy efficiency framework for reporting and measurement. It's the only scientific way that is approved globally. So yeah, if you are in the scope of ISO 50001, you have already audits for every year, and every 4 years you have a new certificate if you performed good enough. And that's very important for, again, supply chain reasons and regulations. So those three signals are speeding up the region's energy efficiency movement.
Yeah. And then, like, again, as I said earlier in the session, as a non-technical person, of course, I would still can acknowledge how important it is to like put this kind of plan into work so that, you know, compliance becomes so much easier, right? Because you already you start to like curate this data, and like it's just the perfect arrangement.
Yes, the great thing is when
Yeah.
when one of our customer had ISO 5001 reporting for this year only, it was a very new deal for them. And while we were preparing with them, we actually realized that all Apollo data is already ISO 5001 data. So they have all historical reporting, they have all historical data, they have everything at hand, and it was just paperwork and documentation after that. Because our benchmark learn act model is built on the ISO 5001 perspective. So it's not a double work, they just feed each other.
Lovely. I think if you agree as well, we can get into the like little tool showcase that we've been talking about. And I'm really excited for this part.
Yeah, gladly. Now, this tool is available on our Apollo product itself, and it's completely feeding on our own portfolio. So the data is very real here. This screen is created for the golf webinar demo only. So the data is normalized according to golf. So you can actually have some similarities between your plants and facilities here because it's adjusted. So it first makes you pick a sector, right? Retail sector, because as we mentioned, the first step of benchmark is segmentation. So let's say it's a fashion and lifestyle store, and then it's a fashion and apparel type because footwear and accessories are acting differently as per our data says. So when you choose this, you just enter your own numbers. Let's say you have 200 units in malls and 40 in street level that you have been paying your own electricity to the utility companies. Your average consumption, let's say, is 25,000 kilowatts hours per month. That's for the demo reasoning. It may be too much or too less. And let's say your average floor area is 750 square meters. The off-operation share for Apollo benchmark in this sector, in fashion and apparel base, is 15%. But again, let's say you have measured it and it's around 20s. This behavioral improvement is coming from directly the measuring and the competition and ranking part, as we mentioned. That's totally behavioral. But 3% efficiency expectation is pretty conservative here because there are scientific researches that implies just metering and running analytics and just showing some anomalies and peak consumptions decrease the consumption by 8% monthly. So let's keep it in 3%. When you run the benchmark, this is the entire strategy of Apollo software. We just give you the benefit range just before you start our program. So you know exactly where to focus, what store to focus on, and what project to move on with by seeing its ROI. So we say there are two options, which is first one is the low option, meaning zero to maybe too little capital investment. You just use Apollo and its benchmarking analytic tools, and you just have the measurements. So you have off operation hours improvements and behavioral improvements on hand. If you go harder than that, if you have a budget to improve on, this model suggests that 10% of the worst performing 10% of your store portfolio should need an ROI calculated investment plan. And if you conduct that plan, you will annually save more than $450,000. So while we go into deeper than that, as you see, it is the 10% of your total store count, but you can adjust the number to see the numbers. And it says that in Gulf region, in this sector, a typical store of yours should have a consumption distribution like this. So you have those categories to improve on, and it gives you two packages. The package A is aiming for the benchmark, aiming for the median. Like you don't have enough budget, but you have to improve. So you have a very subtle target, you have to achieve one. And you can see its total ROI and payback years. The package B is aiming for the top quartile. You want to be best performing in your sector. You want to be a segment leader. So that's why how much investment you must take on what categories, on what equipment, and what will it return to you. Of course, since it's a demo, the equipment type and everything is randomized and it's very generic right now. But usually in Apollo, we do this by entering your entire equipment inventory, their energy classes, their audit results, and then giving you a ROI-based project timeline. So yeah, that's the demo tool. If anyone is interested in, please reach out to us and we can freely just run this test and get some diagnosis on your portfolio.
Absolutely. You can DM me, DM Sedar on LinkedIn. Any way you can reach us, would like to reach us. You can also drop your emails in the chat if you'd like us to like talk to you directly, or you can like go ahead and book a demo with us. We have like a much more I would say complex and good way of like analyzing this kind of data. Like
more to the point, let's say.
A lot more goes into this for sure. So definitely like whenever you want, you can do that. And we're actually really squeezed for time. So I'm just gonna try to like take 2 or 3 questions. Sedar, if that's all right with you, let me see.
Yes.
Okay, so one question is from Michal Al-Khazal. You mentioned ranges. Our CFO want to prove anything without a number. How do I even convince a range internally?
Well, yes. While we are mentioning that CFOs and finance teams are more concerned with energy costs, they only look at the cost and efficiency part. But when you go with a project and look for a sponsorship, it gets harder for everyone. And if you just say, there is this company called Apollo and they just makes us 15% more energy efficient, they claim to be. Yeah, this sentence seems like a sales number, right? It has no engineering base. It doesn't catch your attention. But if you go with the plans that I showed before, there is an Apollo company that they totally rely on our real measured data, their own portfolio sector benchmarking, grouping and ranking, and then normalized data, and then most inefficient buildings. They focus on 3 ways. One is a zero capital way, just behavioral change and the pattern to it and the outcome of it. Then there are 2 investment packages, which is the median targeted, and the other one is the top performer targeted investment plan. And they call this with our data, with our own store data, and with audits that is actually conducted in our own stores. So that saying, that sentence will catch a CFO's attention because the data is real, it's yours. The ROI is real because there were engineers in our site that worked on, and the project has a ROI, a commitment. So yeah, I can suggest to move on with that.
Okay, I hope that was a good enough answer for you, Michelle. 2 more minutes we have, so I'm gonna move ahead with this. So hello, Sedar and Sarah. We're a supermarket chain and most of our load is refrigeration, not comfort cooling. That's something you mentioned, I think. Does any of this apply? Like any of what you have shared with us, I think.
Yes,
right?
Actually, supermarkets apply even better because there are more energy consumption units in a typical supermarket that you can control, that you can have a set point, that you can maintain or purchase better ones. So again, the similar thing applies here. It goes into the supermarket benchmark of Apollo portfolio, and we can again show you how your data changes between your stores, what's the benchmark, what's the worst and best performing, and we can move on with the same methodology.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna try to squeeze in one more question. The third one we have is a little load bearing, so stay with me. You mentioned the meter shows 5 to 15% for cooling, but the actual number across your estates is 45 to 60%. This is something we said, I think, since mall cooling is folded into the service charge, yes. So when you sit down with a retailer's finance team, how do you get them to accept that gap? Is it usually a fight or do they actually suspect it?
Well, if you put the numbers and again speak through the benchmark data, your missing energy data will be obvious, right? Like entire sector is consuming 50% of their energy as a cooling, but you have 10%. If you're not a superhero or some kind of miracle hasn't happened, that data should be wrong. So when you go to the mall managers, landlords, or that large corporate companies that manage their building, now that you have an intention to decrease your energy inefficiencies, they will feel the urge to give you that data, and you can demand that with proof and the target. So yeah, you can get the data and you can get the true billing and true data formats, and then you can keep calculations on. But as the study that I mentioned before, even if you have no bills or no cooling part of the story, still half of the buildings have reported 30% of in-store efficiency possibilities. So yes, the cooling is the biggest part here. It's a dilemma and it's the target of our progress. But while you are getting that cooling data, you can still focus on in-store energy efficiency. That is also.
Absolutely. So, well, I know you have to run for another meeting, but this is a funny one, so I have to squeeze that one in.
Yeah.
Thank you for the webinar. My question is this: software finding savings sounds nice, but has anyone measured it independently? Monitoring doesn't change physics.
Yes. Monitoring doesn't change physics unless you are Schrodinger's cat, but monitoring changes the way you act, the way you behave, and the way you behave the machinery. So you get the results of your actions, and you now have an opportunity to change something and make the measurements better, right? And now your good actions will be reported, and you are motivated, and you have a way to show your actions have changed something. So in a way, yeah, monitoring changes the physics itself. And as I said before, if you don't measure something, you cannot improve it. It's impossible.
Absolutely. I love that. I love hearing that. So we're going to have to let you go and we're going to have to end the stream, but we're so happy to have hosted everyone. And I would say stay tuned because we're planning another webinar for next month as well. Thank you everyone for coming in. Sedar, did you have anything to add?
No, just a thank you for your amazing hosting. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for listening and joining us today. Expecting your DMs, emails, and any kind of messages here.
I do too, even though I'm non-technical. So hopefully we're going to see you guys again, and goodbye.